The morning sun rose over Zalara Prime like it had for thousands of years before. The blue grass fields stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with the white dome houses of the Zalaran people. Elder Veshtai stood on his balcony, watching the farmers begin their daily work in the crystal fields below. The Zalarans were a peaceful people. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and their skin was light blue like the color of clear water. They grew special crystals that could store energy, and they used this energy to power their cities and ships. For as long as anyone could remember, they had lived in peace with their neighbors across the stars. Veshtai was old, even by Zalaran standards. His 4 arms moved slowly as he prepared his morning tea. He had lived through many changes on Zalara Prime, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. The first sign came as a dark shadow across the sun. Veshtai looked up and saw massive ships blocking out the light. They were bigger than anything the Zalarans had ever built. Black metal hulls with red markings covered the sky like storm clouds. All across the planet, Zalarans stopped their work to stare upward. Children pointed at the strange ships, while their parents felt fear grow in their hearts. The planetary defense system tried to send messages to the unknown vessels, but got no reply. Then the attacks began. Red beams of light shot down from the ships, hitting the major cities. Buildings that had stood for centuries turned to dust in seconds. The Zalaran military, small and unprepared for real war, tried to fight back. Their few ships rose to meet the invaders, but they were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. The creatures that came down from the black ships were like nothing the Zalarans had ever seen. They stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs with hard shell-like skin that looked like black armor. Their heads were shaped like triangles, with large red eyes and sharp teeth that could cut through metal. They called themselves the Korthak Empire. Commander Zektor led the invasion forces. He was bigger than the other Korthak, with scars across his shell and gold markings that showed his rank. He looked at the peaceful Zalaran cities and saw only weakness. To him, they were just another planet to conquer and strip of resources. The invasion took 3 days. The Zalarans had no real army, no weapons of war, no knowledge of how to fight against such enemies. Their leaders tried to surrender and negotiate, but the Korthak had no interest in talking. They wanted the energy crystals, and they wanted slaves to dig them out of the ground. Veshtai watched from his hiding place as Korthak soldiers marched through his city. They rounded up every Zalaran they could find, separating the strong from the weak. Those who could work were chained together and marched to the crystal mines. The old, the sick, and the very young were left behind, but with no food or shelter. The beautiful crystal fields that had fed the Zalaran people for generations were torn up by giant Korthak machines. The white dome houses were knocked down to make room for gray metal barracks where the slaves would live. The clear streams that had flowed across the planet were poisoned by mining chemicals. Within a week, Zalara Prime was unrecognizable. What had been a world of art, science, and peace became a prison planet. Korthak guards with energy whips drove Zalaran workers into the deep mines where the best crystals could be found. Many workers died from exhaustion or accidents, but the Korthak just brought in more to replace them. Veshtai and a small group of other Zalarans managed to stay hidden in the ruins of the old city. They survived by scavenging food at night and hiding during the day. Sometimes they could help other Zalarans escape from work details, but there was nowhere safe to run on their own planet. The elder tried to keep hope alive among his people. He told them that surely someone in the galaxy would hear about their suffering and come to help. The Zalarans had been members of the Galactic Council for centuries. They had friends among the stars who would not let this happen. But as the months passed, no help came. The Korthak destroyed all the communication systems on the planet. Any ship that tried to leave was shot down before it could escape the atmosphere. The Zalarans began to believe that the galaxy had forgotten them, or maybe just did not care what happened to one small, peaceful world. The Korthak worked the Zalaran slaves harder each day. They wanted to strip the planet of its crystals as quickly as possible before moving on to conquer other worlds. Commander Zektor had orders to extract every valuable resource and then leave the planet as a dead rock floating in space. Many Zalarans died in the mines. Others died from the poor food and bad living conditions in the slave camps. Children were separated from their parents and put to work as soon as they were old enough to hold mining tools. The Korthak did not care if their slaves lived or died, as long as the crystals kept flowing. HFY grew weaker each day, but he refused to give up. He gathered the remaining free Zalarans and told them they had to keep fighting, even if it seemed hopeless. They started small acts of resistance, sabotaging Korthak equipment when they could, and helping slaves escape when possible. But deep in his heart, the Elder feared they were fighting a war they could never win. The Korthak were too strong, too numerous, and too cruel. As he looked up at the alien ships that still filled the sky above his dying world, HFY wondered if anyone in the universe would ever care enough to fight for people they had never met. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship was 3 months out from Earth, heading toward the outer colonies to deliver supplies and patrol the frontier. It was supposed to be a routine mission, but Jake had learned that nothing in space was ever really routine. The Liberty was one of Earth's newest ships, built for long-range exploration and defense. Her crew of 200 men and women came from all over Earth, united by their desire to explore the galaxy and protect human interests among the stars. Jake was proud to command such a ship and such people. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the communications station, monitoring the various signals that traveled between the stars. Most of it was regular traffic between human colonies, but sometimes she picked up transmissions from other species. Today was different. A strange signal had been coming through for the past hour, weak and broken. "Captain," Amy called out, "I'm getting something unusual on the long-range communications array. It's not in any human language, and it's badly damaged. Looks like it's been traveling through space for months." Jake walked over to her station. "Can you clean it up?" Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "I'm trying, sir, but whoever sent this was either in a hurry or under attack. The signal is fragmented and encoded in a way I've never seen before." Commander Lisa Park, the ship's tactical officer, joined them at the communications station. She was a tall woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Could be a trap," she said. "Pirates sometimes send fake distress calls to lure ships into ambushes." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But Amy, keep working on it. If someone needs help, we need to know." For the next 6 hours, Amy worked to decode the mysterious transmission. She ran it through every translation program the Liberty had, compared it to known alien languages, and even tried to find patterns in the signal itself. Slowly, pieces of the message began to make sense. What she found made her blood run cold. "Captain," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "you need to hear this." Jake returned to her station, along with Lisa and the other senior officers. Amy played the cleaned-up transmission through the bridge speakers. Even though it was translated by the computer, they could hear the fear and desperation in the alien voice. "This is Elder HFY of Zalara Prime. Our world is under attack. The Korthak Empire has invaded our planet and enslaved our people. We are a peaceful species with no military. Our children are dying in slave camps. Please, if anyone receives this message, we beg for help. We have no weapons, no defenses, no hope. They are killing us slowly, taking everything we have. Please help us. Please do not let our people die forgotten among the stars." The bridge fell silent. Jake felt his hands clench into fists as he listened to the recording again. The pain in the alien's voice was unmistakable, even across the barrier of language and species. How old is this transmission? Jake asked. Based on the signal decay and distance calculations, I'd say it was sent about 8 months ago, Amy replied. The coordinates put them almost 200 light-years from here. Lisa shook her head. That's way outside our patrol area, Captain. We don't have authorization to go that far from human space. Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez, who had been listening from his station, spoke up. Even if we wanted to help, it might be too late. 8 months is a long time. This Korthak Empire might have already finished whatever they were doing there. Dr. Helen Brooks, the ship's medical officer, had arrived on the bridge during the discussion. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but Jake could see anger building in her expression. We can't just ignore this, she said firmly. These people sent out a cry for help. If we don't answer, who will? The doctor's right, Jake said. But this isn't a decision I can make alone. Amy, send a message to the USS Ranger and USS Phoenix. Tell Captain Stone and Young that I want to talk to them immediately. Within an hour, the 3 human captains were talking over secured communications. Captain Rick Stone of the Ranger was an older man with gray hair and 30 years of experience in space. Captain Linda Young of the Phoenix was newer to command, but had proven herself in several difficult situations. I've heard the transmission, Stone said. It's heartbreaking, but we have to think about our own people first. These aliens might already be dead, and we could be walking into a trap. What if it was Earth? Young asked. What if human colonies were being attacked and we sent out a distress call? Wouldn't we want someone to help even if they were strangers? Jake had been thinking the same thing. We have a chance to make first contact with a new species, but more importantly, we have a chance to save lives. The Korthak Empire sounds like the kind of enemy that won't stop with one planet. You think they might threaten human space eventually? Stone asked. If they're conquering planets and enslaving entire populations, they're exactly the kind of threat we were sent out here to watch for, Jake replied. This could be our chance to stop them before they get closer to Earth. Lisa had been reviewing the tactical situation. 3 ships against an entire empire doesn't sound like good odds, she said. Maybe, Jake replied, but 3 human ships might be more than this empire is expecting. From what the transmission said, they're used to fighting peaceful species with no military experience. They might not know how to handle a real fight. Dr. Brooks added her voice to the discussion. We swore an oath to protect the innocent. These Zalarans are innocent, and they're dying while we debate. After 2 hours of discussion, the decision was made. The 3 human ships would change course for Zalara Prime. They would investigate the situation and, if possible, help the Zalarans against their oppressors. It would be humanity's first real test in galactic politics, and they were going in blind. Jake returned to the bridge and gave the order to change course. As the Liberty turned toward the distant coordinates of Zalara Prime, he wondered what they would find when they got there. Would they be too late? Would the Zalarans still be alive? Could 3 human ships really make a difference against an empire? He looked at his crew, busy at their stations as they prepared for the long journey ahead. These men and women had signed up to explore the stars and defend Earth. Now they would have a chance to do something more. They would have a chance to prove that humanity stood for something in this vast galaxy. Amy looked up from her station. Course laid in, Captain. We'll reach Zalara Prime in 18 days. Take us there, Jake ordered. And Amy, keep listening for any other signals from that region. If the Zalarans are still alive, they might try to send another message. As the 3 human ships jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a world they had never seen to help people they had never met, Jake hoped they would arrive in time to make a difference. 3. The USS Liberty dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalara system, followed closely by the Ranger and Phoenix. Captain Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what he was seeing. The system was full of ships, but they were not the peaceful vessels he had expected from the Zalarans. Sensor report, Jake ordered. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked quickly at her station. I'm reading 17 large vessels in orbit around the fourth planet. They match no known human designs, but they're definitely military. Heavy armor, multiple weapon systems, and what looks like mining equipment. Commander Lisa Park studied the tactical readout. Those ships are positioned to control all traffic in and out of the system. Classic occupation formation. Whoever these Korthak are, they know what they're doing. Jake opened a channel to the other two ships. Stone, Young, are you seeing this? Captain Stone's voice came through clearly. Confirmed. Looks like we're not too late after all. The question is, what's our next move? We need intelligence before we act, Jake replied. Amy, take us closer, but keep us hidden behind that asteroid field. Let's see what we can learn. For 3 days, the human ships studied the Korthak occupation. What they saw made them angry. The planet's surface showed massive scars where forests had been cut down and mountains torn apart for mining. Huge gray structures had been built where the sensor readings showed cities used to be. Streams of small ships moved constantly between the surface and the orbital platforms, carrying what looked like extracted resources. Dr. Brooks worked with the science team to analyze the data they were collecting. The environmental damage is extensive, she reported to Jake. They're strip mining the entire planet. At this rate, Zalara Prime will be uninhabitable within a year. What about life signs? Jake asked. We're detecting Zalaran biosignatures, but they're concentrated in small areas that look like camps or work sites. The population appears to be about 60% of what it was before the invasion. Jake felt his anger growing. 40% of an entire species dead in less than a year. These Korthak were not just conquerors, they were destroyers of worlds. Commander Tony Silva, the Liberty's Marine commander, studied the surface installations through the ship's powerful telescopes. He was a tough man who had seen combat on several frontier worlds, but what he saw on Zalara Prime disturbed him. Captain, Tony reported, I can see Zalaran work gangs being moved between mining sites. They're chained together and guarded by Korthak soldiers. This isn't just occupation, it's slavery. Lisa examined the Korthak ships more closely. Their design suggests they're used to fighting opponents with inferior technology. Heavy armor but limited maneuverability. They're built to intimidate and overwhelm, not to fight a real space battle. Jake made his decision. We're going in. Tony, I want you to prepare a drop mission to the surface, find the Zalaran resistance, make contact, and gather intelligence on Korthak ground forces. Yes, sir, Tony replied. I'll take a small team in stealth pods. If we can link up with locals, we can coordinate our attack with resistance activities. The Marine commander selected his team carefully. Sergeant Nina Walsh was an expert with explosives who could take out key Korthak installations. Corporal Ben Cole had studied alien languages and first contact protocols. Private Lucy Reeves was a communications specialist who could establish secure links between the human ships and ground forces. As Tony's team prepared their equipment, Jake called another meeting with the other ship captains. We're looking at a planet-wide liberation operation, he told them. The Korthak have 17 ships and unknown ground forces. We have 3 ships and about 600 people total. Those aren't good odds, Captain Stone observed. Maybe not, Captain Young replied. But we have something they don't expect. Every species they've conquered so far has been peaceful. They've never faced a military force that was designed for war. Jake nodded. That's our advantage. They think all spacefaring species are like the Zalarans. They don't know that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. The plan they developed was simple but risky. Tony's team would land in stealth pods and make contact with the Zalaran resistance. Once they had intelligence on Korthak positions and capabilities, the 3 human ships would attack the orbital platforms while Marine forces struck key installations on the surface. As night fell on Zalara Prime, 3 small pods launched from the Liberty. They were coated with materials that absorbed sensor sweeps and moved too slowly to trigger motion detectors. Tony watched through his pod's tiny window as they entered the planet's atmosphere, flames dancing around the heat shield. The pods landed in a mountainous region where sensor readings suggested Zalaran refugees might be hiding. As Tony climbed out of his pod, he breathed the alien air for the first time. It was thinner than Earth's atmosphere, but breathable, with a strange, sweet smell that might have been from the native plants. Nina and Ben emerged from their own pods, weapons ready. The landscape around them was scarred by mining operations, but they could see caves in the rocky cliffs that might provide shelter for survivors. "Movement," Lucy whispered, pointing toward a group of rocks about 50 meters away. Tony raised his hands to show he was not armed. "We're friends," he called out in English, then in the basic Zelaran phrases Ben had taught him. "We received your message. We came to help." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a figure emerged from behind the rocks. It was a Zelaran, thin and obviously malnourished, with tattered clothing and fear in his large eyes. His forearms shook as he approached the humans. "You are not Korthak," the Zelaran said in broken standard, the trade language used between species. "No," Tony replied. "We are humans. We came from Earth to help your people." The Zelaran stared at him in disbelief. "You came from the stars to help us? But why? We are nothing to you." "Because it's the right thing to do," Nina said simply. More Zelarans appeared from hiding places among the rocks. Soon, Tony found himself surrounded by about 30 survivors, all looking at the humans with a mixture of hope and disbelief. An elderly Zelaran approached slowly, moving with the dignity of leadership despite his obvious suffering. "I am Elder Veshtai," he said. "I sent the message you received." Tony felt a chill as he recognized the name from the distress call. This was the voice they had heard, crying out across the emptiness of space. "Elder, I'm Commander Silva of the Earth vessel Liberty. We have 2 other ships with us. We're here to drive the Korthak from your world." Veshetai's legs gave out, and he sat down heavily on a rock. "You came," he whispered. "After all this time, someone actually came." Ben knelt beside the elder. "We need to know about Korthak positions, how many soldiers they have, where they keep their weapons and equipment." "I will tell you everything," Veshtai replied. "But first, please tell me, are you really here to fight for us? You would risk your own lives for people you have never met?" Tony looked around at the desperate faces surrounding him, then up at the stars where his ship waited. "Elder, humanity has a saying, no one fights alone. We came because your message reached us, and because leaving you to suffer would make us less than human." As Veshtai began to describe Korthak positions and patrol schedules, Tony activated his communicator. "Liberty, this is Silva. We have contact with local resistance. Beginning intelligence gathering now." In orbit above, Jake received the transmission and smiled grimly. Phase 1 was complete. Soon the Korthak would learn what it meant to fight against humans. They had conquered peaceful species who had never known war. Now they would face a species that had never known anything else. The liberation of Zalara Prime was about to begin. The first shot of the war came at dawn on Zalara Prime. Sergeant Nina Walsh crouched behind a damaged building, watching the Korthak patrol march past her hiding spot. The insectoid soldiers moved in formation, their hard shells gleaming in the morning light. They had no idea that death was waiting for them. Nina activated the charges she had placed during the night. The explosion tore through the Korthak patrol post, sending fragments of metal and alien bodies flying through the air. Before the survivors could react, human weapons fire cut them down. The message was clear. The occupation was over. 2 miles away, Commander Tony Silva led another team against a Korthak communications center. The aliens inside never saw the humans coming. Corporal Ben Cole had studied Korthak equipment for days, learning how their systems worked, Within minutes, he had shut down their local communication network and started broadcasting a message to every Zalaran on the planet. "People of Zalara Prime," the message said in their own language. "This is Commander Silva of the human fleet. We have come to liberate your world. Stay in your shelters. Help is coming." In orbit above the planet, Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display as Korthak ships began moving to respond to the surface attacks. "All ships, this is Morrison. Begin orbital assault now." The USS Liberty opened fire first, her weapons systems unleashing destruction on the nearest Korthak vessel. The alien ship's heavy armor, designed to intimidate peaceful species, meant nothing against human military technology. The Korthak ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up space for thousands of miles. Captain Stone and Captain Young coordinated their attacks on the orbital mining platforms. The Korthak had built these installations to be efficient, not defensible. Human weapons tore through their structures like paper, sending debris raining down onto the planet below. Commander Zektor stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. In the space of 10 minutes, he had lost 4 ships and 3 mining platforms. His communications officer was receiving reports of attacks all across the planet's surface. "Who are these humans?" Zektor demanded. "What kind of species attacks without warning or negotiation?" His tactical officer studied the sensor readings. "Unknown, Commander. Their ships are smaller than ours, but much faster. Their weapons appear to be designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat." "And the surface attacks?" "Coordinated strikes on communication centers, supply depots, and patrol bases. They seem to know exactly where our weak points are." Zektor felt something he had never experienced before in his years of conquering peaceful worlds: fear. These humans fought like warriors, not like the gentle farmers and scientists he was used to defeating. On the surface, Major Ryan Clark had taken command of the ground operation. He was a veteran of fighting on 6 different worlds, and he understood how to coordinate air and ground attacks. His forces moved through the Korthak positions like smoke, hitting hard and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Elder Veshetai followed the human forces as they liberated the first slave camp. He watched in amazement as human soldiers showed concern for wounded Zalarans while simultaneously planning their next attack. These warriors seemed to be able to switch between compassion and deadly violence in an instant. "How do your people fight this way?" Veshetai asked Major Clark as they watched human medics treating freed Zalaran prisoners. "Practice," Clark replied grimly. "Humans have been fighting wars since before we learned to write. We know how to kill our enemies and protect our friends at the same time." Lieutenant Kevin Hayes led the night operations, taking his team deep into Korthak-controlled territory to strike at supply lines and communication centers. The aliens had never faced enemies who could move silently through darkness, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Kevin's team destroyed 3 ammunition dumps in one night, leaving Korthak forces cut off from resupply. Specialist Dana Foster worked with Zalaran engineers to sabotage the mining operations. The Zalarans knew their planet better than the invaders, and they showed Dana exactly where to place explosives for maximum damage. Within a week, crystal production had dropped to nearly 0. The Korthak tried to adapt to human tactics, but they were fighting a kind of war they had never seen before. Their previous conquests had been simple affairs: arrive with overwhelming force, destroy any resistance, and begin exploitation. The species they conquered had no knowledge of military strategy, no experience with guerrilla warfare, no understanding of how to coordinate complex operations. Humans were different. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that confused and terrified the Korthak. Human soldiers would use sophisticated electronic warfare to disable Korthak systems, then charge into close combat with knives and explosive devices when their ammunition ran low. Corporal Janet Price, the Liberty's chief medic, had set up a field hospital in a liberated Zalaran city. She treated human and Zalaran wounded with equal care, something that amazed the alien survivors. When Korthak prisoners were brought in, she treated them too, despite their crimes against her new allies. "Why do you help our enemies?" Veshetai asked her one evening as they watched Korthak wounded being loaded onto transport ships. "Because healing is what I do," Janet replied. "We're not like them. We don't kill prisoners or let the wounded suffer, even if they're our enemies. That's what makes us human." As the war entered its third week, Commander Zektor found his forces being systematically destroyed. The humans seemed to know his every move before he made it. His ships were outgunned in space, and his ground forces were being picked apart by an enemy that struck from nowhere and vanished into thin air. The final blow came when Lieutenant Colonel Susan Reed led a combined human-Zalaran assault on Zektor's main base. The Korthak commander had thought his fortress was impregnable, surrounded by force fields and defended by his best troops. But Susan had spent days studying the base's defenses with Zalaran engineers who had built the original structures before the invasion. The attack came from underground. Zalaran tunnels that had been used for crystal mining became highways for human assault troops. They emerged inside the base perimeter and opened fire on the defenders from behind. At the same time, orbital bombardment from the human ships destroyed the force field generators. Zektor watched from his command center as human soldiers fought their way through his defenses. He had seen recordings of other species in combat, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of humans in battle. They moved with deadly precision, covering each other's movements and coordinating their attacks with a skill that spoke of centuries of warfare. When the humans finally breached his command center, Zektor expected to be killed immediately. Instead, Major Clark stepped forward with his weapon lowered. "Commander Zektor, I presume," Clark said calmly. "You are now a prisoner of war. Your forces have been defeated, and this planet is liberated." Zektor stared at the human officer. "You are not going to execute me?" "No," Clark replied. "We're not like you. Surrender, and you'll be treated according to the rules of war." As Korthak's soldiers throughout the system laid down their weapons, Elder Veshetai stood with Captain Morrison watching the last enemy ships leave Zalaran space. The war was over, but Veshetai knew that something much more important had begun. "Why did you come so far to fight for us?" the Elder asked. Morrison looked down at the blue grass plains of Zalara Prime, now free again after months of occupation. "Because someone had to," he said simply, "and because that's what humans do." 6 weeks after the last Korthak ship left Zalaran space, Captain Jake Morrison stood in what had once been Elder Veshetai's home. The building had been damaged during the occupation, but was slowly being repaired by human and Zalaran workers side by side. Through the window, Jake could see the blue grass plains beginning to grow back where the alien mining machines had torn up the earth. Elder Veshetai moved slowly around the room, his 4 arms carefully arranging items that had been hidden during the war. Many precious things had been lost, but some had survived. He picked up a crystal sculpture that glowed with soft light, one of the few pieces of Zalaran art the Korthak had not destroyed. "It will take years to repair the damage," Veshetai said quietly. "The mining scars, the poisoned water, the destroyed cities. But we will rebuild." "You won't rebuild alone," Jake replied. "Human engineering teams are already working on the water treatment plants. We'll help with whatever you need." The Elder set down the sculpture and looked at the human captain. "I still do not understand why your people came to help us. We had never met before. We had nothing to offer you in return. Yet you risked your lives to save strangers." Jake had been asked this question many times over the past weeks, by Zalarans, by his own crew, and even by the Korthak prisoners. The answer was always the same. Because it was the right thing to do. Where we come from, that's reason enough. Outside, the work of rebuilding continued. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Reed had established training camps where Zalarans were learning basic military skills. Never again would they be helpless against aggressors. The lessons were difficult for a peaceful people, but they understood the necessity. "Your weapons are different from ours," one young Zalaran student said to Sergeant Nina Walsh as she demonstrated human small arms. "It's not about the weapons," Nina replied. "It's about being willing to fight for what matters. You have something worth protecting here. Your families, your culture, your freedom. That's what makes a soldier, not the gun in your hands." Dr. Helen Brooks had set up medical stations throughout the liberated territories. She worked with Zalaran healers to treat the physical and emotional wounds left by the occupation. Many Zalarans had lost family members or been separated from their children during the slave labor programs. "Healing takes time," she told HFY during one of their conversations. "The body recovers faster than the mind. Your people have been through something no one should ever experience." "But they are strong," the elder replied. "Stronger than the Korthak believed. Stronger than we believed ourselves." The liberation had indeed revealed strength in the Zalaran people that they had not known they possessed. During the final weeks of fighting, many Zalarans had joined the resistance, helping human forces navigate their world and providing intelligence on Korthak positions. They had discovered that peace-loving did not mean weak. Commander Tony Silva had been working with Zalaran engineers to understand their crystal technology. What he learned amazed him. The energy crystals that the Korthak had been stealing were not just power sources but sophisticated computational devices that could enhance ship systems far beyond current human technology. "If we combine your crystals with our ship designs," Tony explained to a group of Zalaran scientists, "we could create vessels that are faster and more efficient than anything either of our peoples have built before." The scientists were eager to share their knowledge. "The crystals work by resonating with quantum fields," one of them explained. "Your fusion reactors could provide the base energy, while our crystals amplify and focus it." This technological exchange became the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history, a true partnership between species. Most interstellar relationships were based on trade agreements or military alliances of convenience. What grew between humans and Zalarans was different. It was built on mutual respect and shared values. Captain Rick Stone of the USS Ranger had taken on the task of establishing communication networks between human and Zalaran worlds. "We need to make sure this kind of thing never happens again," he told Jake during one of their planning sessions. "If the Korthak or someone like them attacks either of our peoples, the other needs to know immediately." The communication system they designed would allow instant contact across hundreds of light years. More importantly, it would carry a simple message to any aggressive species: attack one of us, and you face both of us. Word of the liberation of Zalara Prime spread quickly through galactic civilization. Other species who had suffered under Korthak rule began sending messages to both Earth and Zalara Prime, asking for help or offering support. The humans had shown that the Korthak Empire could be defeated. Some of these messages came from species that were still under Korthak occupation. Captain Linda Young of the USS Phoenix had compiled a list of 12 worlds that were known to be suffering under Korthak rule. "We can't save them all at once," she told the other captains, "but we can't ignore them either." Jake studied the list of threatened worlds. "We'll need more ships, more people. This is bigger than just one liberation mission." Elder HFY overheard the conversation. "You would do this again? Risk your lives for other strangers on other worlds?" "If we have to," Jake replied. "Freedom isn't something that should be reserved for just humans and Zalarans. Every thinking being deserves the right to live without fear." The elder felt tears form in his large eyes. "Then let us help. Zalara Prime will provide ships, supplies, whatever you need. We understand now what it means to fight for others." Within months, A joint human-Zalaran task force was being assembled. Human military expertise combined with Zalaran technology and knowledge of galactic politics created a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They called themselves the Liberation Fleet. Their first joint mission was to the world of Kefara, where a species of winged humanoids had been enslaved by a Korthak garrison. The attack was swift and decisive. Human tactics and Zalaran-enhanced ships made short work of the occupation forces. The liberation took 3 days instead of 6 weeks. As Jake stood on the bridge of the new joint command ship, the USS Freedom, he watched Kefaran children playing in gardens that had been slave camps just days before. Beside him, Elder Veshtai observed the scene with satisfaction. "We have started something important here," the elder said. "A movement that will spread across the galaxy." "More than that," Jake replied. "We've shown that different species can work together for something bigger than themselves. That's going to change everything." The Liberation Fleet continued to grow as more species joined the alliance. Some brought military strength, others brought technology or knowledge. All brought the same commitment to protecting the innocent and opposing tyranny wherever it was found. Years later, historians would mark the liberation of Zalara Prime as the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. It was the moment when the principle was established that no species would stand alone against aggression, and no cry for help would go unanswered. Elder Veshtai lived to see his world not just rebuilt, but transformed into something greater than it had been before. He often told visitors the story of how human soldiers had emerged from the sky like falling stars, bringing hope to a people who had lost everything. "We thought no one would fight for us," he would say, "until human soldiers emerged from the sky. Now we know that courage can cross any distance, and justice knows no boundaries between the stars." And most importantly, we learned that no one fights alone. The blue-grass plains of Zalara Prime grew green again under the light of their star. Children played where slave camps had once stood, and in the sky above, ships from a dozen worlds patrolled together, making sure that freedom would never again be threatened in this corner of the galaxy. The age of liberation had begun.